I moved to the edge of town for peace. After 10 years of city noise, horns, and people living stacked on top of each other, I wanted space, a little land, a garden, and silence that wasn't broken by sirens. The property I bought was modest, but it was mine, a small house with an oak tree in front, a gravel driveway, and a gate that separated my world from everything outside it. When I signed the deed, I remember the county officer saying, "This area's quiet. Just watch out for the HOA up the hill. They can be particular." I laughed, not realizing how true those words would become. At first, everything was exactly how I dreamed. Early mornings I'd sip coffee on my porch and listen to the wind moving through the grass. I repaired the old fence, added a mailbox with my name on it, and installed a new steel gate. Black, simple, sturdy. It felt symbolic, a small line that said, "This is my space." It didn't take long for my first introduction to the Homeowners Association, specifically its self-appointed queen, Karen. She showed up unannounced one Saturday afternoon, wearing a pastel cardigan and holding a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. Her son, a man in his mid-20s who looked like he hadn't done an honest day's work in years, followed her with a smug look on his face. "Hello, I'm Karen, HOA president. You must be our new neighbor," she said, smiling like someone who'd already decided she didn't approve of me. I explained politely that I was happy to meet her, but that, to my knowledge, my property wasn't part of any HOA district. She blinked as if I'd just spoken another language. "Well, all properties in this neighborhood fall under our community guidelines," she replied confidently. That was my first red flag. I'd already checked the legal records before buying the house. My land sat just outside their official boundary, close enough for them to feel entitled, but legally separate. I told her that gently, even showed her a copy of my property map. Her smile froze. Her son crossed his arms and muttered, "That's not gonna fly. Everyone follows the rules here." I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "I like peace, so I'll stay respectful. But this property's private, Mum. Matal." Then I closed the gate. That moment, I saw it in her eyes, that mix of disbelief and control slipping away. Some people can't stand boundaries. Over the next few weeks, small inconveniences began. My trash cans were, mysteriously, moved from the curb. HOA flyers started appearing in my mailbox, and once I found a note taped to my gate. Gates must remain unlocked during daylight hours. HOA Safety Regulation 4B. I laughed softly. They really don't quit, I thought. I threw it away and locked the gate again. Then came the day everything escalated. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I was cleaning my tools in the garage when I heard raised voices outside. I stepped out and saw Karen's son standing by my locked gate, talking on his phone, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Yeah, I'm telling you, he's blocking public access. There's a locked gate here that's not supposed to be locked. You need to send someone down." At first, I thought he was bluffing. Then I heard him say, "Yes, 911. He had actually called the police." For a second, I didn't know whether to laugh or feel annoyed. I stayed calm, walked over and asked, "Is there a problem?" He turned, phone still to his ear, and sneered. "Yeah, the problem is you can't just lock off community property. My mum says this is against regulations." "Your mum's wrong," I said evenly. "This is my land. This gate is on my deed." He ignored me, pacing like a self-appointed security guard. A few neighbors had peeked out their windows, the kind of suburban curiosity that thrives on gossip. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, looking mildly confused. One of them, a tall man with tired eyes, asked, "All right, who called?" Karen's son waved. "I did. This guy locked the gate on community property. Nobody can access the pathway behind his yard now." The officer turned to me. "Sir, can you explain?" "Of course," I said calmly. "This is my property. That gate is on my land, according to the county's official map. The so-called pathway he's talking about is a private easement that hasn't been active since the 1980s. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof?" I nodded, went inside, and returned with my deed, title map, and county zoning paperwork. The officer looked over them for a solid minute, his expression turning from professional to slightly amused. "He's right," he said finally, glancing at Karen's son. "This isn't community property. That should have ended it." But then Karen herself arrived, marching down the sidewalk like a storm cloud in pastel. "Officer, officer, I'm the HOA president here, and I can confirm that gate violates our guidelines," she announced, handing over a printed rulebook. The officer flipped through the pages politely. "Ma'am, this HOA doesn't have jurisdiction here," he said. "This property is outside your boundary line." Karen froze. Her son looked at her, confused. But he's right next to us," she stammered. "Close doesn't mean included," the officer replied gently. There was a silence that felt like victory wrapped in politeness. I thanked the officers for their time, and they left, reminding everyone to keep it civil. Karen didn't. That evening, she taped another note to my gate. "You may not be under our rules, but you should respect community harmony. Consider this your final warning." I stared at the paper, feeling my patience run thin. That's when I decided, no more letting it slide. The night after the police left, the air felt still, but not peaceful. My porch light glowed faintly against the dark street, casting a soft shadow over that gate. The one that had somehow become a battlefield of ego. I remember sitting there with my coffee, listening to the crickets and thinking, peace shouldn't have to be defended like this, but sometimes it must. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Every note, every unwanted flyer, every interaction. Not out of anger, but because I knew people like Karen. They didn't stop until something forced them to. So I turned my quiet patience into quiet preparation. Days passed, and the tension only thickened. I saw Karen's son drive past my house several times a day, slowing down to glare through the fence. Once, I caught him taking photos of my yard from across the street. I didn't react. I just waved politely, the way you'd wave at a child who thought he was clever. A week later, a letter arrived, printed with HOA letterhead. It read, "Dear resident, your locked gate continues to obstruct community safety access. Failure to comply with HOA guidelines will result in a $500 fine and possible legal action. Sincerely, HOA President Karen J." I smiled reading it. There was something oddly satisfying about watching someone dig their own hole with confidence. I placed the letter carefully in a file folder labeled Evidence. Then, instead of responding to Karen, I wrote an email. Not to her, but to the county property office. I attached my deed, zoning records, and a photo of the letter. I asked one simple question. Can an HOA fine or regulate property that lies outside their mapped jurisdiction? The reply came 2 days later. No, they cannot. Any such attempt would be a violation of county law. Attached was a formal statement confirming that my land was completely independent of the HOA's reach. That was all I needed, but I wasn't done. I made copies, one for my file, one for the police department, and one addressed directly to Karen. I placed it neatly in an envelope, added a sticky note that said, "For your records," and left it in her mailbox. 2 days later, I heard it, the sound of tires screeching in my driveway. Karen stormed up to my gate again, red-faced and shaking. "You think you're smart?" she snapped. "You can't just embarrass me in front of the officers like that." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. But then she added, "I've run this neighborhood for 10 years. Nobody disrespects me like this." I stood there calmly, my hands in my pockets. "Karen," I said quietly, "you don't run this property." "You never did." She blinked, speechless for once. Her son tried to chime in. "Mum, don't..." But she turned and marched away before he could finish. For a while, things went silent. No notes, no flyers, no harassment. The peace I had wanted from the start finally returned. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had accepted defeat. But people like Karen rarely go down quietly. One afternoon, about a month later, I received a notice from the county civil office, a formal complaint filed by the HOA against me for non-cooperation with community safety standards. I laughed softly as I read it. Karen had taken it to the county level, thinking her influence could reach there too. I gathered my documents, the same ones I had shown the officers, and went down to the county hearing. It wasn't a full courtroom, just a small office with a long table. Karen sat across from me, her son beside her, clutching a thick binder labelled HOA Rules. She looked so sure of herself. The county officer began, "Mrs. J, this is a complaint about a locked gate on Mr. Smith's property, correct?" Karen nodded, sliding her binder forward. "Yes, it's about maintaining community standards. He refuses to follow the same rules as everyone else." The officer turned to me. "Mr. Smith, your response?" I opened my folder and handed over the county's own zoning confirmation. "My property lies outside the HOA boundary," I said. "This association has no legal standing over it. Here's the official statement from your department." The officer read it slowly, then looked up at Karen. "Ma'am, he's correct. According to county records, your HOA cannot enforce regulations or fines on this property. In fact, sending those letters may qualify as harassment." The silence that followed was pure poetry. Karen's face went pale. Her son shifted uncomfortably in his chair. But he lives right next to us," she muttered weakly. "Geography isn't jurisdiction," the officer replied. "You're advised to cease all contact and communication with this homeowner unless through legal counsel. Otherwise, further action may be taken." The hearing ended in under 15 minutes. Karen didn't say a word to me as she left. She didn't have to. Her silence was the first real peace I'd had since moving there. After that, the neighborhood changed. Word spread fast, not because I told anyone, but because HOA power always travels by rumor. People who once avoided me started waving as I passed by. A few even came over to quietly say, "Good job standing up to her." The best moment came 2 weeks later, when a county notice appeared on the HOA bulletin board. The county council has suspended the HOA's authority pending investigation into multiple complaints of overreach. It turned out, I wasn't the only one they'd bullied. Karen's letters, her fines, her demands, they'd been going on for years, but no one had pushed back until now. Once the county started looking, the entire structure collapsed like a house of cards. A few months later, Karen resigned for personal reasons. Her son moved away. The HOA remained, but without her, it was quieter, more reasonable. And me, I still wake up early, make my coffee, and sit on my porch in the same quiet I'd dreamed of when I bought this house. The gate is still there, strong, silent, black steel that gleams in the morning sun. Sometimes I run my hand along it and smile, not because I won, but because peace doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from knowing who you are and what's yours. People ask me sometimes if I'd ever move. I always give the same answer. No, I worked for this peace. I built this boundary, and I'm keeping both. That gate, once a source of conflict, became something else. A reminder that not every battle needs noise, and not every fight needs rage. Some victories are quiet, some justice doesn't echo. It simply endures, and that, I've learned, is the kind of peace no HOA can touch.